Thanks a lot, Shreyas, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here along with all the other illustrious panelists that we have today. As part of the panel discussion today, we will be talking about how GCCs have progressed in their automation journeys, the related challenges and common pitfalls, along with the best practices and learnings that these practitioners will be sharing through the course of the next 30 to 40 minutes. Nishcha and Subrato, in fact, gave very interesting talks. They've talked about this evolutionary phase of automation that we are currently in, right? And how it's essential to look at automation in a very holistic manner, especially with respect to low-code and no-code platform technologies. We will be going deeper in this specific area, deriving practical insights on how organizations can meaningfully progress and truly mature in their automation programs. With that, I would like to invite the panelists for this session, who are all stalwarts in the GCC automation ecosystems and come with deep experience of owning and executing on automation charter of global enterprises. We have Vijay, who's the current head of transformation at ANZ, leading the innovation and automation initiatives at the organization. I welcome Irshan, who's the deputy GM for IT operations and member of the Allstate India leadership team. He is delivering and driving key engineering initiatives and building innovation muscle for the company. Priyanka, who's the SVP and head of shared services and wealth management technology for APAC at Northern Trust, is responsible for the next generation technology platforms that are supporting front office, middle office, and back office operations at the company. Gururaj is the department head of intelligent automation within Bosch. And he is focusing on strategizing, establishing, and growing modern technology programs, especially with respect to intelligent automation at Bosch. Ravi is the digital OSS director at British Telecom and is responsible for building software automation platform that help plan, build, and operate BT's network and IT infrastructure. So I welcome all of you again, and it's great to have all of you. While Subrato gave us a really deep view in some of these areas around low-code platforms, around MXCPs and modern application development methodologies, we will just zoom out a bit and, as we touched upon earlier, start with how automation has really evolved from more traditional approaches to hyper-intelligent automation, as we are calling it today, right? So Vijay, maybe I'll start with you. ANZ, we know, started their automation journey more than 5 years ago, right? How did you really start with the automation journey? What were the triggers, so to say, to put in serious investments in this direction? And then, I think if we can bring in the other panelists as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Prankur, and fantastic presentation, Subrato, about some of the key aspects of automation and some mistakes that companies make, and I can totally empathize with that. So as far as ANZ is concerned, right, look, automation is something that is not something that we started just 5 years ago. Even earlier also, there was some kind of automation that was happening. It's just that automation wasn't sexy those days, right? So we used to do SharePoint-based automation and macro-based automation. Now, around 5 to 6 years ago, 2016, when we started looking at RPA, robotic process automation, in a different way altogether, that's when we started that journey, which is primarily more of a test and learn kind of a thing. And in fact, suited the ANZ service center ecosystem, where generally in GCC we don't necessarily have great control over systemic changes in the service centers in the GCC network, and generally the system changes are looked after by the home organization, the corporate office. But when it comes to lower end automation, automated transactional processes, That's where you have a lot more empowerment. And it just fit in very well with that. So it started with that. And pretty soon we started realizing the limitations with RPA. That RPA by itself can only give you tactical solutions. It's not strategic. It can't be a strategic solution. Well, the tool can be a strategic tool, but the solution itself is going to be tactical in nature. And one of the key things is that even with that, I mean, of course, it requires a lot of systemic changes, but even with the solutions that RPA produced back in 2015, 2016, 2017, there are certain elements, certain hindrances. RPA, the way it was, the way it has been important is that at that point in time, you could not deal with anything that is not digital, that is not electronic. Right? Data which is not electronic or digital, you can't do much automation with that. So to become an actual progression to address that problem, then we need OCR to be able to digitize information. Once the OCR capability came in, that's when we started using artificial intelligence to be able to now infer and interpret that digital data. So that has been the progression. It has, I would say, we are at a stage where RPA is possibly, from a use case perspective, we literally scraped the bottom of the barrel. There are not many RPA use cases there. But we have invested in AI and ML. We have a platform, what we call as a machine learning as a service platform built within PMZ now. So that, progression is on.
Great, Vijay. Thanks for sharing that. Ravi, I know you are coming from a slightly different setup, more focus on from a telecom scenario. So, if you can talk about that, you took a slightly different approach towards automation. If you can maybe elaborate on from your perspective on what has the automation journey looked like. You again started it a few years back, but how has it changed, and what was the motivation on your end?
Sure. Firstly, good morning and welcome to everyone. And it's great to be part of a panel where we talk about low code, no code, and future proofing our technology stack there. So thanks for that. But talking about BT, as we all know, is a telco, but we want to be seen as a tech co. So there is going to be a transformation journey that we have to undertake in order to achieve that. Now, software platforms cannot be sitting in a corner and funnel this whole journey. Clearly, 4 years ago, we decided to create a software unit within one of our units called networks, and who primarily plan, build, design, operate the networks. Yeah. Now we decided that it's going to be software platforms which will help underpin the way we change the way we operate. For example, with the advent of network capacity growing more than double across the globe, irrespective of which geography we are in, the user appetite to use the network bandwidth increases. So along with it increases the speed with which we have to build our networks. So clearly, we recognize that as one of our key trigger points to see how we can transform the way we work. And equally, the second key element for me was to look at how network itself is evolving. Now, we're moving away from these hardware kits to more virtual and more software-based defined networks, and also network virtual functions. Clearly, with all of these, if you put them all together, it is a no-brainer for us to realize that automation platforms becomes fundamental to all these transformation. So for us, it's all about how we can build platforms that help us change the way we work. So it involves hearts and minds of our people, and that's where we start. And then we look at our processes, and then look at what tools that help us deliver this change. And that's our experience in the last 4 to 5 years now.
Got it. Great, Ravi. Thanks for sharing that perspective. I think the other, and we got this question from one of the attendees as well. The landscape itself of enterprises is changing, right? How your industry is evolving is also impacting how you look at technology and how you look at automation, for that matter, right? So, Priyanka, maybe if you can give perspective, you coming from Northern Trust, from a banking, of course, during the pandemic itself, there were a lot of changes in the banking ecosystem, the whole shift towards virtual setup. Did automation play a big role in that transition that was made? And how are you looking at automation holistically to deliver on some of the mission critical functions at the company today?
Sure. First of all, good morning, all, and thanks, Prankur, for having me here. Vijay talked about the automation journey in ANZ, and I was thinking our automation journey is not really drastically different from that, right? So we started with RPA initially as a quick and easy way to streamline critical processes, specifically mimic human behavior for low value repetitive tasks, or more to screen scrape data from internal or external portals or application screens, right? But with wider adoption of RPA, we figured out that it was error prone, needed maintenance, was brittle. You had both attended and non-attended bots, and it typically best worked only for specific use cases, right? So these digital bots provided greater accuracy and time and cost savings, but they were not really intelligent digital workers that were versatile or self-organizing or autonomous, right? So this meant that we expand other technologies which provide better orchestration and integration capabilities that could be used along with cognitive capabilities for coverage of more complex use cases and far better provide operational efficiency, right? And I think in a large way, the pandemic actually expedited it, accelerated it, because we are primarily middle office and back office operations seated out of India. And though technology was always probably used to work from home, operations wasn't. And there were all these groups that were mandated to actually work from office. So the best benefit probably from the pandemic was more acceptance towards automation and look at it more with a strategic angle. And I think that has been good, right? So to talk about a couple of things that probably happened during the pandemic, right? And more as transformational automation exercise within NT, I'll probably touch base on a small use case. So the whole arena of alternative assets has very little standardization and in the capital markets world as such. And portfolio managers use a variety of reporting formats. And our unorganized approach to the data and too many manual processes actually leave it very chaotic. And there are various pain points that we are actually trying to streamline and address in NT. And this was all probably triggered because of the pandemic situation, right? So the first issue is about procuring the documents in this case. Investors receive communications from hundreds of partners on monthly or quarterly basis. And these are typically as emails, which instruct them to go to various portals, find their statements. So the act of procuring the documents itself is kind of like burdensome. And what we did was basically use RPA and script-based automation to trawl the investor portals hourly. Once you had the document, that was only the first step, right? And you needed to tag it appropriately so that it can go into your enterprise document management system. And we used AI-infused solution to help with this tagging. Once your tagging was resolved, we had to focus on how do we classify and extract information from these statements and documents and ingest them into the system. And this led to the usage of natural language processing routines. A lot of workflow capabilities gotten because of the orchestration that they provide, the integration that they provide. OCR technologies got added to convert scanned images into machine-readable format. DocuSign smart forms got added to accelerate the customer engagement experience and things like that, right? So overall, the automation was always happening. I mean, like automation is not really a new term. It has always existed in the IT world. Only the technology set is kind of like evolving and changing. But I think the pandemic did accelerate the automation journey to a large extent.
Great. Yes, I think that's something that all of us would probably agree to. I think the other one challenge that a lot of companies and specifically GCC organizations face is in getting that organizational buy-in, at least in the initial stages, right? While as technologists, all of us are very passionate about technology, they're always open to experimentation. Getting real budgets and investments for those programs can be sometimes difficult, right? So, Guru, maybe from your perspective, being the intelligent automation department head at Bosch, if you can add some perspective on how do you really show that ROI from automation? How do you get the automation buy-in from the organization and the executive sponsorship? I think some of those dynamics, if you can talk about, maybe give some recommendations to our attendees today who might be slightly early in their journey and are looking to really scale their automation programs. I think, yeah, that will be good to understand.
Good morning, Prankur. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the question. Our journey in automation was, at least my team, when we started off with automation, it was something similar to what Ravi said, where I was responsible for, responsible for infrastructure operations. And we did a few automations which actually excited the entire organization, saying, oh, something like this can be done. And 4 years back, they asked us to set up an automation program with an objective to bring in transformation through automation. Yeah, and with a specific goal saying I would want to see around 15% savings through automation technologies. But looking at an organization like RBI, which is a GCC for Bosch, we had different technologies which we had to cater to. Yeah, and of course, this particular automation program was given the free hand to identify technologies that can bring in that quick savings within the organization. Yeah, so one of the things which very easily evolved is an RPA was coming out as one of the front runners, which could show some quick savings for the organizations. One lighthouse project led to a few more and a dozen more, and the organization was slowly joining the queue to what needs to be done. While lighthouse projects were being done by our team and probably trying to bring in that excitement about automation, we also engage with the leadership to set up top-down level goals, saying, okay, each department, each unit needs to look at how automation could be driven within their organization. Yeah, this gave a good insight of how topics could be driven. Meanwhile, within Bosch, many other units also had started similar journey. And then a call was taken that a center of competence for intelligent automation needs to be set up, where the governance for automation needs to be defined centrally, or else each one was going in their own direction. The different tools were being selected within the organization, but a governance framework had to be put in place. Yeah, that's where the center of competence for intelligent automation was put in place. Which had the goals of bringing in the policies that are required to drive automation within different units. It had the goal of selecting the right technology and showcasing it as the preferred technology, and onboarding the technology, creating a platform, putting up the infrastructure. All these were taken up centrally, while local center of excellences were created in multiple units, whether it is in India or Germany or Japan, multiple units were created to identify a list of processes that could be taken up for automation. Yeah. So this, I think, can be one of the directions which probably the new people who are taking on the journey at this stage could also look at a hub-spoke model where a central team actually defines the governance and platform, what's good, do's and don'ts of automation, where to apply automation. All this is defined centrally, while at the regional level, the pipelines could be built and driven across the organization.
Thanks, Guru. Yeah, I think the whole COE concept is something which is very interesting, and maybe we'll come back to it a little later, go deeper into that as well. But before that, just continuing on the theme of technology evolution, Irshan, I think I have one question for you in terms of what I think you have already experimented with RPA. You have been, I think, you spent considerable time in exploring the possibilities and potential of RPA, right? Are there any shortcomings that you would want to talk about? Of course, Subrato in his talk did touch upon a few of those. Do you echo with some of those challenges, so to say? Can you talk about how, in your experience, RPA has it delivered on its promise, and how are you exploring maybe other technologies like low code, no code as you go forward?
Sure. Thanks, Prankur. Thanks, Zinnov, for having me here. Good morning to you all. So we started our RPA journey, automation journey, with RPA probably 3 to 4 years back. And I just want to bring out a point here, because 3-4 years ago, most of the companies haven't started their digital transformation journey. And so RPA was, as Subrato mentioned, was a big promise at that time, because we wanted to eliminate some of these manual processes through bots. So that was the intent. So probably if I look at it, if I go back in time, at that point, 3 to 4 years back, it was actually giving us the ROI, while, as the others mentioned, setting up, getting it moving was a challenge, because we were new. We wanted to figure out how to establish governance and all that challenges we had. But now, if you look at with the the legacy systems are transforming in organization, because everyone's into this moving into a digital enterprise. It's time that we pivot from just pure play RPA. So that is the stage we are at right now, because we started off by building capabilities in RPA, called it as a center of excellence. Now we pivoted. Now we are calling it HIA, which is Hyper Intelligent Automation COE. And then that's what we are looking at. While we were pretty early stage in our low code journey. But having said that, and just an interesting topic around, the low code environments, what we have around us, especially as Priyanka mentioned, the pandemic really, forced us to do some of these things. For example, the Microsoft Power Automate tools, what we have, which is available with our Office 365. And I know for a fact that our corporate functions team, HR, finance, they build workflow tools, especially during the pandemic, for approving a laptop delivery to some other city where our employees stationed, even some expense management, or creating surveys for employee engagement activities, all that. So I think it's still a journey. I think the most important point I would mention here is the willingness to pivot when we are changing, because everything is changing. It's not just RPA, and there is further to that. So I really want to kind of point back to that slide what Subrato had, where the crack in the road and a band-aid solution. it used to be, it wasn't that in the beginning, but now it looks like that. So I think it's time that we start looking at different new platforms, and that is a journey we are in right now.
So thanks, Irshan. And I think we hear about these different technologies, right? We know there's RPA, there's low code, no code. I think some of you talked about cognitive automation, APIs. Maybe Priyanka, I'll bring in you here. How do you select the different technologies in these different scenarios or use cases, right? How do you choose which ones to really go ahead with in the real cases within your organization?
RPA typically automates a clearly defined process. So the use cases that we pick RPA for are usually repetitive, manual work intensive, high volume, low value, more rule based and predictable kind of processes. What we have done in the recent past is around switching to low code, no code platforms to accelerate the application development. But the initial intent definitely was to have the better time to market and speed, right? Those were the key drivers. But what we realized is it has a much better orchestration and integration capabilities. And with the right governance model, this can actually act as your strategic set of platform to drive the automation. So that has been kind of like the key differentiator between how we pick with RPA versus the other low code and no code platforms.
Got it. So I think the two clear benefits that you spoke about were really in terms of faster time to market with rapid application development, better integration capabilities with your existing IT systems. Which any other things that you would want to add? You did speak about how you're pivoting from RPA to some of these other low-code, no-code style technologies. Any other unique benefits that you have been able to witness from your experience?
See, with RPA per se, I mean, our evolution has been such that right now, these days, we don't do much of RPA. Right? So it's been more on the machine learning platform, where we are looking at doing more of AI type of use cases. But and therefore, the evolution has been such that we have not necessarily looked at a citizen developer kind of a concept. It's always been a team which does this development. And obviously, people who are, we've had a lot of operations folks who've learned the RPA tools and have got into that. Yeah, so it's not like the developers are essentially Java programmers or things like that. A lot of them are operations folks who are tech savvy and have learned. And the tools that we use for RPA have been pretty easy to learn, and that's how we progress.
Got it. Ravi, I think you spoke about low code, no code as one of the primary technologies that you have been using for automation. You took a slightly different approach with using more open source technologies, given when you started. But today we have a number of mature low code, no code platforms out there in the market as well, right? So, can you talk a bit about in terms of this whole technology evolution within the low code no code space? What led you to using low code, open source kind of approach as when you started, and how is that progressing for you?
Sure. I mean, when we say these different technologies, I have to say that it goes along with carrying the people along, as I mentioned earlier. Now, when we started this automation focus, I would say transformation, automation was one element or dimension of it. Now, when we started this journey, we realized that some of the users of our tools are nowhere close to the software technologies. So it was no way that we can go to them with a low-code platform and change the way they're going to look at our no-code platform, for example. So what we said was, let us build open source technologies primarily based on two fundamental reasons. Number one, we realized that the area that we specialize on requires a lot of other industry compliance too. For example, standards that we have to adhere to. Now, when I looked around, there were no specific matured low-code platforms 4 years ago, for example, in the network activation space. Yeah. Now, so all I'm calling out here is what works for me may not necessarily work for somebody else who's listening to this call. So you need to look at what your industry and where your industry is moving, number one. Number two, how mature are your users, business users, or your customers for that matter. Take those two into consideration and look at where you are in your maturity model of your digital transformation journey. If you're going to have a lot of legacy living with you for a longer period of time, you'll have to be careful in not throwing something new and then expecting another parallel stack to be built while you still have to live with the joy of legacy stack. So you have a lot of different factors that you consider. And when we did that, we realized that building our open source platforms is fundamental to our IPR. So we built those platforms. And what we are now tapping on, as people here on the call mentioned, is we have clearly moved away from these low value repetitive jobs to high value insight driven jobs. When I say insight, it is driven on the back of data. So your data strategy is equally important, but we went with open source technologies by building a clear data strategy, which allowed us to launch new apps on the go as we were able to set our base on top of which we were able to get our applications launched. So open source worked for us. Now there are a lot of low code, no code platforms, but please understand what is the ask from the customer for you and in your space, and as to where the industry is moving in your domain before making any choice. Now you might as well go back and say, yeah, this works for me. It's a very mature area, like Irshan mentioned. Office 365 tools are there. Probably that might work for you. You don't have to reinvent anything. You just have to start using those platforms. But for somebody where the industry is not matured and it is evolving, you need to choose the right tools for you. So it's a mixed bag here. There's no one straight answer of which low code works. Or for us, it worked with an open source technology where we built low code platforms, which is helping us move away from months and months of work to actually weeks or 3 to 4 weeks. So that's our experience worth sharing here. But always look at what is your customers ask and where your industry is moving.
Got it. And Guru, I think a lot of this technology evaluation, technology orchestration, making these choices is something that a COE is typically empowered to do, right? So a lot of companies that are looking to go serious in their automation journey, they're looking to build this and set up these COEs. How do they choose the best fit models and the best construct for the COEs, right? We hear about these different structures like centralized, having a federated model. What would be your recommendation on how they choose the best fit model for as they think about setting up a COE?
Okay. Before I jump into COE, I will probably also try to give one real life example for where I think a low code, no code could fit in. Yeah. More here, and when I see Subrato's slides, I was able to articulate one particular use case. So when I talked about automation program which was put in place, we were asked to bring in as much automation as possible. But then when we talked to business, one of the things which came out from the business is, can you come up with end-to-end automation? Yeah. So while you do automate one piece of the puzzle, there is much more that needs to be done. Just to give you an example, let's say there are invoices that are coming in from our suppliers. An RPA tool could probably quickly process each of these invoices, yeah, provided all the approvals are there in place. So for the approvals, probably you need a workflow which is required. And while you have put up all this in your enterprise, a supplier still probably wants to know what is the status of his invoice. Yeah. So he or she would again come back and ask what is the status, and somebody needs to look into the system and give a response back. Yeah. So an end-to-end automation would be eliminating the resources at every point or any action which is probably being taken. And that's where I felt a low code no code could very nicely fit in, where we can connect the different automation tools to bring in that end-to-end automation story. Now, with respect to the COE question which you asked, it depends on the organization and the approach which is taken in the organization. Generally, what happens is when an automation initiative is driven, if it is not centrally being pushed, then each of the units would be mushrooming with their own set of automation initiatives across the organization. And then the challenge comes out saying, how do you harmonize the automation activities across the organization? How does an CIO or a CTO see the benefit of automation across the organization? Yeah. So that's where a centralized unit which will help defining the KPIs of how to measure automation, how to deliver the automation pill in the respective units would also help. And a federated approach would also give the independence for the business unit to define the speed of their automation journey. Yeah. Some of them would probably have the bandwidth and they would have invested on their core people. They would have invested on the trainings that are required to drive automation within their respective units. Yeah. And federated approach would be giving that power to the business units to define their roadmap and drive it at their own pace. Yeah.
Got it. Irshan, any comments from your side? Would you echo what Gururaj mentioned, or would you have a contradicting viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I think there is no one size fits all kind of solution. It depends on your organization. It depends on as Ravi mentioned earlier, right? Where is your business going? How are the business leaders thinking? While we have the talent locally in India to create that kind of a centers of excellence, but when I look at it, ours was a journey where we had developers who could deliver automation. But when we have multiple shores, people in different geographies, multiple business units, all looking at, so each business unit has their own CIO, for example, and the way they think could be different, how they think could be different. But again, to bring it all together at one point makes sense. But I would go rather into that federated model where, we can have representation from multiple business units so that, as Guru mentioned, we can, deliver at scale and also ensure that, we are timely in terms of providing a solution. But if you look at companies which has a very complex operating model, one central organization might be a challenge to kind of ensure that the reach of that organization is across all the business units. So again, my point is you need to figure out what best works for you. I mean, there is no prescribed way of doing it, is what I would say.
Got it. Thanks, Irshan. I think we are slightly over time in terms of how the time we planned, but I just flowing into the open discussion and Q&A that we planned towards the end of the event today. I'd want to bring in Subrato and Nishchay as well to take some of the audience questions as well that we've been getting over the chat. So maybe the first one I'll direct it towards Subrato. Subrato, I think one of the questions that the audience, one of the attendees has is in terms of the UI UX capabilities that platforms like OutSystems are providing today. Can you elaborate on that? And how does it really differentiate what some of the RPA platforms are today claiming to do? And is there some convergence that would be happening there?
Yeah. So when you look at UI UX, OutSystem is no different than the high code. Okay, it is. So let me give you a perspective, because we have been talking about low code quite a lot. but within OutSystem, we never call it as a low code. Okay, it is a enterprise level transformation engine, which is more from a multi-experience application development for future and for faster. Okay, now what is this low code is all about? Okay, and what is this engine is all about? We call it as a kitchen, right? Now when we look at from a UI UX point of view, it's a full stack application development. The full stack application development consists of your UI, your UX, your workflow, your data, everything. Okay, so you don't need to worry about all those things. Okay, now there are a lot of solutions in the market where you just need to worry about the UI UX and all, because it is the UI UX is completely based on the way that you want to do it, period. Okay, then it basically comes, the most critical and the most complex aspect is how do you integrate with your backend? Okay, and that is where a lot of projects gets failed. That is where a lot of projects get extended, and since we support with all the APIs and we support we do all the integrations from a drag and drop point of view, and that's the most complex things. Okay, so you just name the solution, and that integration is available. And a lot of customers are also using OutSystem as a microservices layer also, because all the integrations are much more faster. At the same time, we also provide 3,500 open integration points, okay, as a part of our Forge component without even charging any cost to the customer, right? Customer can go to our website, download that particular thing. And we know the fact that there are a lot of companies who look at these integration element as a chargeback elements also. So nothing from our side. And that open community is keep on adding those integration element, because project get failed not because how fast you can able to develop, but because how fast you can able to connect with the system of record. And the system of record connecting is the most complex things which I have seen, followed by automation of your entire DevOps process. Automatic, it is completely automatic, okay, and followed by creating your multiple experiences. And this is what the engine should able to do. And this engine should able to create multiple recipes that you are looking out for. The recipes can be anything. The recipes can be either you want a tandoori khana or you want a Chinese food. It completely depends upon you. But at the same time, the most important part is how fast you can bring the recipe. You need to have those ingredients with you which can make that recipe, and that's what we do in this, and in a most flexible manner, because we are not connected to one platform. We are completely flexible. It can be on-prem, it can be off-prem, it can be deployed in any way, and that's the flexibility we give it to our customers. And the most important thing I would like to also say that sometimes customers says that, hey, if I'm doing all those development, all those automation and all those things, after 5 years, if I go away from you, if I terminate the contract, if I go away from you, okay, what will happen to me? And I think we are the only software company on the planet which gives the complete editable code to the customer back, even after when the customer decide, because and that gives the complete flexibility to the customer that they are not into any kind of worry that whatever the IP that they are developing on our platform, it is always going to be with them. So I know my answer is very long, but I think I could give a perspective.
No, Subrata, if I may add, Prankur, I think the call out there, the stress that Subrata is making is not about just picking a task and automating, but it is about, what is your data platform? How do you build your UI, UX? How do you integrate it back to your ecosystem? And that is what is all about this platform. Now, whatever term you choose to call it, if you have a platform that does it, then you probably have that platform with you and you can call it no code. But the stress is more about how it integrates with your ecosystem, how it allows you to stand up your UI, UX and go full stack till the end, as well as how it is connected to your data. Because trust me, data is your crown jewel. And if your low code platforms are not integrated, you can do a top of 5% of RPA on top of what you're currently doing. So it is fundamental to your transformation is about how these platforms integrate with your ecosystem and marry it to your architecture.
Yeah, I understand your question and I respect your question, and it's a very valid question. I think if I don't want to name the global customer, but I think the mortgage institute, which is carrying around 60% of the market share, has gone ahead with OutSystem for all their B2C use cases as well as B2B use cases, and it exactly has the same thing what you're talking about. So I think it's all about, sometimes people don't believe when we are into a discussion, but when they see the magic at the work, then the discussion goes into a different direction. I think you need to see the platform to believe what I'm talking about, actually, and then I think you will understand the point what I'm trying to raise. So if you need any kind of discussions, please feel free to let us know. I can set up a special session for you at any given point of time, so that you can understand what I'm talking about is a fact, and we will show you live. We will show you live whatever the point that you're talking about, and I hope that would answer all your questions.
Thanks, Subrata, for that. And really, I think it was a pleasure having all of you. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so I'll just hold myself back in asking more questions here. But thanks for all the passionate discussions and views all of you shared. And we look forward to keeping the dialogue on even offline. I think I'll just hand it over back to Shreyas to close the session today. Thanks.